Egypt on edge, a state of emergency after ISIS attacks 2 Christian churches on Palm Sunday. Calling for prayers, Pope Francis remembers the victims just weeks before his own visit to the country. Vatican correspondent Mary Shovlin will tell us if he's changing his plans. Justice Gorsuch.
So help me God, so help me God.
Why the newest member of the Supreme Court will have an immediate impact. And celebrating the start of Holy Week. Palm Sunday celebrations from the Vatican to the place of Jesus' birth and burial on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, April 10th, 2017. We begin with a developing story. An apparent murder-suicide inside an elementary school in San Bernardino, California, leaves 2 adults, including a teacher, dead. Police say 2 students were also injured and are in critical condition. They were airlifted to a hospital after what's believed to be a domestic dispute. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. We're also following a big story overseas. ISIS targets Coptic Christians in Egypt, killing 45 people in 2 attacks on Palm Sunday. Our Jason Calvi joins us now with more on this tragic story. Jason.
Wyatt, Pope Francis, President Trump, and other world leaders are all offering their condolences after the deadliest day for Egyptian Christians in decades. I must warn you, some of these images are tough to watch.
Palm Sunday, the start of Holy Week, when Christians remember the suffering and death of Jesus. It explodes in violence when terrorists attack St. George's Coptic Church in Tanta, Egypt. Hours later, a second blast rocks St. Mark's Cathedral in Alexandria, Egypt, where Coptic Pope Tawadros II was leading prayers. Death sweeps over the historic Christian center. ISIS claiming responsibility for both bombings, following through on threats to attack the Coptic Christian minority. The Christian cassocks now marked with the word martyr. Tertullian, an ancient church father, famously said, "The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church." But the heartbreak for the survivors must be unimaginable tonight. As the faithful ask God to protect the Egyptian people and end terrorism, President Trump called the Egyptian president to condemn the attacks and say he's confident President El-Sisi is committed to protect Christians and all Egyptians. El-Sisi calls for a 3-month state of emergency. He's deploying military troops across the country to beef up security and protect Christians who worry about their safety. This Christian says, "How did this happen on our feast? Where is the security? There is no security." As for Holy Week at the site of the attacks, there are new reminders of Jesus' promise to bring life from death.
And new tonight, Egypt's government says it's killed 7 ISIS militants who were plotting to attack Christians. The country's state of emergency in now effect. It allows arrests without warrants and quicker prosecution. The U.S. Bishop's president says the darkness of terror cannot withstand the Easter light of resurrection. Wyatt?
Jason Calvi, thanks for bringing us up to speed on that. Pope Francis condemns the Egypt attack, which comes less than 3 weeks before his visit to the country. Vatican correspondent Mary Shovlin continues our team coverage from Rome. I talked to her earlier today while I was at the White House. Mary Shovlin joining us now from Rome. Mary, what did the Pope say about the attack against Coptic Christians in Egypt?
Wyatt, the Holy Father, at the end of Palm Sunday celebrations here in St. Peter's Square, expressed his deep condolences for what took place in Egypt yesterday. And he expressed them to the Coptic Patriarch Tawadros II and to all of the dear Egyptian nation. As he put it, he prayed for all of those who lost their lives, and he prayed for those who are continuing to recover, all of those who were injured in the attack. And then, Wyatt, he also prayed for the conversion of those who around the world would choose to spread terror and death. And he ended by praying for the conversion of anyone who makes or traffics in weapons.
Mary, has the Pope considered canceling or changing his plans at all to visit the country?
Why, that was the question on everyone's minds this morning. I spoke with the director of the Holy See press office, Greg Burke, who confirmed to me that the Holy Father's trip to Egypt will proceed as planned. We also heard from an archbishop who works in the Vatican Secretariat of State, who said these attacks are meant to sow fear, create a climate of fear. He said this will not put off Pope Francis's mission for peace. A Franciscan who also met with Pope Francis this morning said the Pope conferred and confirmed to him personally that he would be going to Egypt, and said the Holy Father was very adamant about getting there and being there in person.
Well, let's talk about law enforcement now. Mary, are police around Rome and the Vatican increasing security in light of the attacks?
They are, Wyatt. If you consider that the attacks in Egypt took place as Christians were celebrating Palm Sunday, beginning their Holy Week celebrations, and we've entered into Holy Week here in Rome, so the security presence is somewhat heightened. In and around St. Peter's Basilica, you see a greater military presence. The streets are closed off to car traffic all around the St. Peter's Square. Any faithful going into St. Peter's Square are subject to security attack. Italy's Minister of the Interior said that we're going to expect about 1 million people here for Holy Week. That means they're already here. And he said that the struggle is trying to protect everyone without necessarily infringing on their rights as citizens. He said there will be extra surveillance, extra controls, but nobody's rights will be hindered. They want everyone to enjoy the Easter celebrations as much as possible.
All right, Mary, well, for you and your Rome team, know that we are wishing you guys the best to stay safe, especially during this Holy Week. Mary Shevlin, our EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Wyatt.
For further analysis on Egypt's church bombings, we have in Nina Shea, director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. Thanks for joining us, Nina. Why is ISIS attacking Christians?
This is a genocide, an anti-Christian genocide by ISIS. We know that from Iraq and Syria. We're seeing it now in Egypt. They're calling them infidels. They're saying in films that God has ordered them to kill infidels. So they are, and they're calling them apostates in the statement, claiming credit for the Palm Sunday attacks. So they want to eliminate them.
Egypt's president, as you heard, has declared a state of emergency. Will it realistically help Christians?
Well, they need protection. Their churches need military protection. The Pope, the Copts have their own Pope, Tawadros II. He needs protection. Their bishops need protection. It's going to be very difficult, but the United States does give them $1.3 billion in military aid a year. That's what they need, and they need metal detectors in front of these churches to help protect them. There are a lot of Copts. There are 9 million. This is more than all the other Christian communities in the Middle East combined, and it's actually more than any other non-Muslim community in the Middle East, including Jews in Israel. It's larger than that.
Speaking of Jews in Israel, there have been reports that militants in the Sinai area are attacking the southern border of Israel. Does that have anything to do with the persecution of Christians that we've been hearing about in Sinai?
ISIS started, it came out of the closet, if you will, in Sinai. It has long been a terrorist hotbed up there in Sinai for many years. But in February, they released a film threatening the Christians, saying that they're our favorite prey, and that they were going to eradicate them. And they were basically at that point targeting Christians in Sinai. And they killed 7 of them and drove 1,000 Christians out of Sinai, out of their homes. So it's been a hotbed of terrorism. The conflict's intensifying there. It's not going to be good for the Christians.
Last week, your colleague Samuel Tedros said that preemptive measures need to be taken to prevent these types of attack. What specifically do you think needs to happen?
Well, there has to be counterterrorism, and the United States should be helping with that. There also has to be a change in culture. The government has to start explaining to the people through the education system, through the media, which the government has a great deal of control over, through the Sunni Center of Learning, Al-Azhar, which the government also supports, has to explain and educate the population about who the Copts are, that they're Egyptian, they predated Islam there. They're not apostates. They did not change or convert from Islam to Christianity. They've been there since the first century, centuries before the Muslims were there. And they have to really clarify what is meant by this term infidel. Is this a reason to kill someone? So they have to begin working on the education and the culture.
Nina Shea, director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. Thanks so much for your insight.
Thank you.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Several thousand police officers from across the UK lined the streets of London today to remember a fallen colleague. Constable Keith Palmer was stabbed to death nearly 3 weeks ago outside Parliament during an attack. The suspect killed 4 other people, running them over on Westminster Bridge. He was shot and killed by police after stabbing Officer Palmer. Secretary of State joined 6 other foreign ministers in sending a message to Russia: stop supporting Syrian President Bashar Assad. They blame him for last week's chemical weapons attack against his own people.
We rededicate ourselves to holding to account any and all who commit crimes against the innocents anywhere in the world.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson warns the U.S. will stand up to aggressors who attack civilians. He laid a wreath at a World War II memorial in Italy, where he's attending the G7 meeting with other foreign ministers. Tillerson has said the defeat of ISIS is the first priority for the U.S., but the Trump administration also wants to rally world leaders behind a strategy to end Syria's drawn-out civil war. British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson says G7 foreign ministers may impose new sanctions on people in Russia who support Syrian President Bashar Assad.
He won't stop here. If he needs to do more, he will do more.
UN Ambassador Nikki Haley calls for regime change in Syria. She says President Trump is keeping his options open.
What we're trying to do is obviously defeat ISIS. Secondly, we don't see a peaceful Syria with Assad in there. Thirdly, get the Iranian influence out. And then finally move towards a political solution.
Critics of the president's plan urge caution before committing to more military action.
I do think it would lead to a quagmire for the United States for a generation that we would regret.
Former CIA Director David Petraeus says we need a comprehensive approach to stop the bloodshed.
That is going to include notions such as security zones, perhaps some no-fly zones, and perhaps some further strikes against Bashar al-Assad's air forces.
Yesterday, President Trump made phone calls thanking the 2 Navy commanders who carried out last week's U.S. missile attacks against Syria. Tillerson will also meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow tomorrow, where Syria will be one of the top matters they discuss. After a bitter confirmation battle, Neil Gorsuch becomes the newest Associate Justice of the Supreme Court.
So help me God. So help me God. Congratulations.
He was sworn in this morning by Justice Anthony Kennedy. The 2 previously worked together when Gorsuch served as his law clerk. Gorsuch fills the nearly 14-month-old vacancy created after the death of the late Justice Antonin Scalia.
This process has reminded me just how outrageously blessed I am in my law clerks, in my family, and in my friends. And I hope that I may continue to rely on each of you as I face this new challenge.
The addition of Gorsuch to the bench restores the High Court's conservative majority. The event in the White House Rose Garden was the second of 2 oaths, the first conducted privately in the Justices' conference room by Chief Justice John Roberts. Dr. Matthew Bunson, EWTN senior contributor and senior editor with the National Catholic Register, has been following the Gorsuch hearings. Thanks. Welcome back, Matthew.
Great to be with you.
Judge Gorsuch is the newest member of the High Court, so what do you think we can expect in his first days?
Yeah, well, he's not just the newest, he's also the youngest, but he still knows his way around the building, as you just pointed out. He clerked for Justice Kennedy, so he knows the ins and outs, which is going to be important because he's really going to have to hit the ground running. In just a couple of days, on the 13th, he's sitting with all of the other justices for the first time in a conference room. And they're going to be deciding cases that they want to take for the next term. And usually if they're tied at 4-4, he's now going to be an important deciding vote, and not just in cases, but also that important 4th vote in allowing the court to pick up cases, including an important religious liberty one of a bakery in Colorado that is being penalized for refusing to bake cakes and provide services to gay weddings.
So you mentioned the case in Colorado. There's a large number of pending cases here. Any other in particular important cases for Catholics?
Yeah, well, there are 13 cases still on the docket for the Supreme Court for this term. It runs the gamut from Second Amendment to voter ID. The one that is going to be of most interest, I think, to Catholics is the Trinity Lutheran Church in Missouri. It is a case where the oral arguments begin on the 19th, and Judge Gorsuch will be participating. This is a religious liberty case because the state is refusing to provide grants and money to the church in order to upgrade its facilities. So everyone's watching this particular case.
Based on what you know about Gorsuch, and you were following that hearing, confirmation here that whole week, what do you think his role is going to be on the court?
Yeah, well, he arrives, as I said, as the youngest justice, so he's going to be there for a very long time. In that second oath that he took today, he vows impartiality. He promises not to favor the rich over the poor. Those are strict constitutionalist credentials that he brings to the court. So not only is he succeeding Antonin Scalia, he's restoring that balance that you noted, and he's going to bring a voice for religious liberty to the court.
You mentioned that religious liberty case before.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate he'll be a strong voice for religious liberty and following in the footsteps of Scalia?
Very much so. We know from some of his previous rulings, he supported Hobby Lobby against the government. He supported the Little Sisters of the Poor in their case against the HHS contraceptive mandate. So he's a strong defender of religious liberty, and I think he's going to be a voice for a very long time for religious freedom on the High Court.
Like you say, he's the youngest one. At this point, we'll have to see how it all plays up. It'll be certainly very interesting. Dr. Matthew Bunson, Senior Editor with the National Catholic Register and Senior Contributor with EWTN. Thanks so much.
Good to be with you.
Justice Antonin Scalia receives a posthumous award for his ability to work with people on the opposite side of the political spectrum. His friendship with liberal Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was well known, even though they had vastly different legal opinions. Ginsburg joined Scalia's family this afternoon at the National Press Club to accept the Allegheny College Prize for Civility in Public Life. The award honors two public figures each year, one liberal and one conservative, who respectfully argue their beliefs.
Brilliant, accomplished jurists whose deep friendship was never, not for a single moment, ever imperiled because of an intellectual disagreement. They would not allow it.
The friendship between Ginsburg and Scalia was enhanced by their shared love of opera. Coming up, Palm Sunday celebrations from around the world, including a view from the Vatican. And check out this new attraction in Rome, why the Holy See opened a laundromat. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Pope Francis urges young people to lead the church's future and voiced doubt he'll be around much longer to see it.
Garantisce la vita a nessuno. La vostra età e il futuro davanti.
The Holy Father says no one is guaranteed a long life, and people his age are passing away. The Holy Father added a pope will be at the 2019 World Youth Day in Panama, but he isn't sure it will be him. The 80-year-old Holy Father has said he didn't expect to be pope for very long, but there's nothing indicating that Francis is slowing down. Pope Francis urges scientists to be aware of the effects their decisions can have on human life. He spoke to members of the National Committee for Biosafety, Biotechnology, and Life Sciences at the Vatican. The Holy Father says science and technology are made for the world and not the other way around. And a sign of almsgiving this Lent, the Holy Father opens a free laundromat to help the poor in Rome. The facility has washers, dryers, and irons that were donated. In the coming months, the Vatican plans to add showers, a barbershop, and medical services. The Vatican says the new facility will help poor people restore their dignity. To read more about the Pope's initiative, visit our news partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Christians around the world mark the start of Holy Week. Palm Sunday commemorates Jesus' arrival in Jerusalem before his crucifixion. Holy Week celebrations kicked off at the Vatican Sunday with a solemn procession, with Pope Francis and cardinals walking through the crowds in St. Peter's Square.
Nel nome del Padre, del Figlio e dello Spirito Santo.
In his homily, the Holy Father urged those gathered to pray for the grace to follow Jesus, not in words, but in deeds. Catholics in the Philippines lined the streets to get their palm branches blessed on one of the most important days in the only predominantly Catholic country in Asia.
This is more of remembering, more of a reenactment of centuries past, of what went through Christianity.
Karakosh, outside of Mosul, was once considered the Christian capital of Iraq. Now the town's almost empty, but that didn't stop followers from coming back to attend Mass. From Romania to Peru and Stockholm, Sweden, just 2 days after a deadly truck attack, the faithful celebrated Palm Sunday. In Jesus' birthplace at the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, members of the Catholic and Orthodox churches prepared for the start of Holy Week. And in Jerusalem, the town Jesus entered nearly 2,000 years ago, worshipers waved palm branches during the procession next to the newly restored tomb of Jesus. Holy Week will be a busy one for Pope Francis. On Thursday, he'll even visit a prison to wash the feet of inmates. Up next, words of wisdom from our foundress, Mother Angelica, and teaching people about autism, why Sesame Street just introduced a new character. Jesus died that you might live forever. Do you know anyone you would be willing to die for? That's a lot of love. A quote from EWTN foundress Mother Angelica as we start Holy Week. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Sesame Street introduces a new character to the cast. Julia has autism, and creators hope she will educate kids and adults on the disorder.
Where's Fluffster? Peekaboo! Boy, there sure are lots of ways to play.
And joining us to talk more about autism awareness is the Executive Director of National Catholic Partnership on Disabilities, Janice Benton. Janice, thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
How significant do you think this is that Sesame Street has a character that's going to help children understand autism?
I think it's very important. Anything we can do to help children learn about other people and differences, but that kids are also the same and that they can be friends. And this character will help the children as well as parents and grandparents just become more familiar with autism, learn about it, and just learn that you can be a friend with somebody. You can play together, you can enjoy each other.
And sometimes it's just that simple awareness of being...
Absolutely, and that's why it's important in the churches as well, and that's what we are promoting in parishes as well as in schools. If you grow up with a person, if you play basketball with them, if you enjoy them, become friends with them, then it breaks down the differences.
Several years ago in 2013, during a Day for Life ceremony, Pope Francis had a very interesting quote. I want to put it up here because I want us to see it. He said, "All life has inestimable value. Even the weakest and most vulnerable are masterpieces of God's creation, made in His own image, destined to life forever, and deserving of the utmost reverence and respect." So how do you think churches, schools, organizations can better promote that kind of a culture?
I'm so grateful to you for putting that quote up, because it is so important that we appreciate the dignity of every single person, realize that they're made in God's image, and that the churches need to reach out to each individual person, see them as the person, and try to, if they have needs, meet their individual needs, but just be open to the dignity of every single person.
I believe it was 1 in 68 children is diagnosed somewhere on the autism spectrum. What kind of resources are available through your organization to parents and children who are on that spectrum?
I would encourage your viewers to go to ncpd.org, our website. Right, scroll down just a little bit. We have April is Autism Awareness Month. Click that button and we have Prayers of the Faithful, catechetical aids, prayers, prayer services, many different resources for catechists as well as parents and teachers. We also, the bishops, have sacramental guidelines to help pastors and catechetical leaders know how to integrate and support the needs of people to prepare them for the sacraments, for example. And right now they're under revision, but their bishops are going to be looking at those in June, and they're very important because some of the times people are denied access to the sacraments, even now. We can't believe it after all these years, but those guidelines help to say no, that you can prepare children and adults for the sacraments and explain what it is that's needed.
Sometimes just making all of us aware of what exactly the rules and the guidelines are. Your organization also has an app coming out soon, is that right?
That's right, yes. We're hoping for this summer, and it will be on sacramental preparation and Mass attendance, because that's also important. You need to know how to be able to attend Mass, and you might need a Mass book, and part of the app is to be able to personalize your Mass book. It's like your schedule. You can put your own pastor's picture in it and other people, and the children will be able to use it. It'll also be a really helpful tool for priests to work with a child perhaps who's nonverbal for the sacrament of reconciliation.
Very important. No matter if you have a disorder or disability, we all need that spiritual needs. That's great.
Amen. Absolutely.
Very good. Janice Benton, Executive Director of the National Catholic Partnerships on Disabilities. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Good night and God bless.